I learned to love mornings because they asked nothing of me. Before the office woke, before the phones started their thin metallic chirping, there was just the hum of the espresso machine and the parting of the blinds, the city unfolding in gray and silver. Steam rose from the cup in my hands like a veil. The building across the street kept its lights low, as if it were embarrassed to be seen so early, and rain spread into a soft mist against the glass. I told myself I liked the quiet because it was efficient. In silence, the budget forecast aligned at last, the vendor's schedule clicked into sense, and the numbers obeyed. But that morning, the quiet felt like something else, like relief or sanctuary. It had been a long year of getting reacquainted with myself after a marriage that ended not with slammed doors, but with a straighter spine and a polite signature. I was not bruised, not broken, just rearranged. I wanted a life that could be counted, tallied, filed away at the end of each day. When the elevator chimed, I didn't look up. I was absorbed in a deck on enterprise transformation, buzzwords that meant we were shifting again into a new architecture that could be praised loudly and quietly resented. Voices rose near the reception desk, low and professional, but they carried. A man with an old city baritone said hello, and the receptionist responded in the tone she reserved for people who were either very important or very charming. The executive floor would not open for another hour. Whoever he was, he belonged upstairs, where the wood panels were thicker and the coffee came in porcelain cups instead of paper. I kept working until the receptionist's steps approached my corner, the little pocket of space our team had claimed long ago, next to a window and a dying ficus that everyone pretended was thriving. She introduced him, her tone careful and bright. He had just transferred from the London office. He would be overseeing strategic partnerships, the umbrella that conveniently covered any storm. He wanted to meet the teams before his official welcome, see where the work actually happened. She said my name with a note of pride, as if she had appointed me to something. I rose, smoothing my skirt with a hand I was determined would not betray the small tremor moving through it. He held out his hand, and even in those first seconds I understood the particular danger of him. He was not just handsome. Handsome is a word that flattens many things into a safe shape. He carried himself as if he had spent his entire adult life walking into rooms where he was both admired and resented, and he had learned to let neither emotion stick to him. His eyes were the color of the river in winter, and his smile didn't hurry. He said my name softly, as if testing how it fit in his mouth, and then he repeated it as though confirming that the fit was exact. I said his name back. It wasn't a flashy name. Solid, unornamented, the kind of name that looked good in serif font on a boardroom agenda. He remarked on the early hour, and I told him the budget didn't care for afternoons. He laughed under his breath, the sound like a velvet cough. He leaned against the edge of my desk without actually touching anything, a practiced illusion, and asked what we were building here. What would need attention? I explained the old systems, how they were stubborn, how they required patience and respect. People did too. I knew the rhythms of this place, who listened, who nodded, who waited to oppose until after the meeting, who would say yes only for sport. He let me talk. He asked a question that landed somewhere behind my collarbone, because it wasn't just about numbers, but about the people who moved those numbers along. I felt something gather itself inside me like breath. He had to meet the rest of the department heads, he said. He would be back for the 9 o'clock stand-up. He said thank you in a way that felt personal and not at all corporate, and when he moved away, he left behind the faintest trace of cedar, of rain, of something expensive and restrained. At 9, he returned with the charisma adjusted to public settings. He was warm without being familiar, direct but careful. In the stand-up, he listened more than he spoke. When the marketing director cracked a joke to test him, he smiled without flinching. When the product lead threw out a dare, he did not take it. He kept glancing toward me, but never long enough to create a rumor out of a glance. Still, I felt each one like a touch on the sleeve. Our work together began that week, quietly at first. He asked for the pipeline analyses I had been building into a private folder for months. Quiet contingencies in case of the cuts no one wanted to name. He requested the full history of the vendor contracts, the trials that had been sold as victories and the victories we had forgotten to celebrate. He did not tell me how to do my job. He asked what I would do if I were him. I told him the unglamorous truths. We needed an audit of our hubs in 3 cities that had drifted from the center. We needed to stop pretending we could be everything to everyone. We needed to cut once, precisely, and then let the tissue knit. He listened. He answered the way senior men answer when they've been given a bit of unfiltered oxygen. He breathed more easily. Office air changes when a new senior executive arrives. Gossip wakes early, coffee scented, energized by the possibility that something, anything, might move. He had been sent to fix or to remake. No one was sure which. In the kitchen, the young designers speculated about his suits. The older accountants noted the ring that wasn't on his hand. The HR manager, my friend, raised an eyebrow that meant be careful without specifying of whom. I told myself that I was observing a case study in leadership change. I was cataloging his strategies, his ability to read a room, his refusal to get lost in the theater of a meeting when the work was happening in a hallway afterward. I insisted, to myself and to my unmarried coffee cup, that my attention was purely professional, that what was gathering in the air was nothing a woman in her late 40s hadn't weathered before. I knew better than to mistake competence for intimacy. I knew better than to attribute meaning to the brush of his sleeve, the warmth of his voice when he asked if I was eating, the quiet way he said goodnight as if he hated to concede the day. We traveled to Philadelphia, to Chicago, to a conference in Seattle where the rain felt imported expressly to match the panels on responsible innovation. Travel is an alchemist. It takes 2 people who behave like colleagues at home and turns them into travelers. 2 separate boarders that start to wonder what it would be like to share a map. On the 2nd day in Seattle, our panel ran late. The hotel lobby smelled of lemon and new carpet. The group drifted toward the bar where the small talk could bloom. He asked if I wanted to join, and I said what I usually say, that I had emails to send. He said he had promised to attend the after-hours session with the client's TOO, who found corridors more honest than an agenda. He tilted his head toward the elevators. I said good luck. He said it felt like I was wishing him good luck from very far away. I said that was the safest way to wish anyone anything. At the elevator, we discovered our keys both failed in the same precise way. The receptionist apologized and activated new ones with the practiced empathy of someone who knew that technology prefers humiliating its users when they are tired. We laughed, the easy, unguarded kind that shows your throat. In the quiet ascent, the elevator hummed its small evening song. We stood with polite distance between us. Rain traced the night outside the glass shaft. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty in that particular hotel way, as if each room had drawn its occupant in like breath. He walked me to my door because civility is often a cover for impulse. I thought nothing of it. I thought everything of it. My key worked this time. His did too. He stood in the doorway and asked if I had loved Seattle. He said the rain had reminded him of a different city where he had once been happy and then unaccountably not. He said that happiness is a rental, not a deed. I said I had learned the same lesson, but in reverse. He looked at me like a man studies a map, not to find an address, but to confirm he is not lost. I felt warmth slide along the inside of my wrist, even though he hadn't touched me. He told me good night. He did not move. I moved first. It was nothing, just a light, ridiculous touch on his sleeve, as if to shake a word out of fabric. That would be the moment later that I would loop in my head in a chain of what-ifs. In that moment, it felt like the smallest truth in the world. The night faded with good behavior intact. We did not give the hotel anything to whisper about in its vents. But after Seattle, our conversations carried the softness that follows restraint. He told me, in the way men tell things they've never quite confessed aloud, that he had been engaged once, long ago, in the middle of a climb that had seemed vertical and endless. He had chosen the climb, she had chosen a steadier hill. I told him that steadier hills frighten me too, but for different reasons. He said that he recognized in me someone who measures twice, cuts once, and then quietly finds a way to cover the seam. Back at the office, the project accelerated. Contracts were renegotiated. A leak we had long suspected, but could never find revealed itself in a flourish. A junior manager in a regional hub had been sharing costs with a competitor, not for money but for something as old as any motive, spite dressed in new clothes. HR was drawn in. Legal followed. Everything became very careful. The rumor came for me the way rumors eventually come for any woman who works alone with a man whose name is announced in boardrooms. It arrived with a tilt of the head from a colleague who preferred to appear innocent in every conversation. It arrived in a Slack message that was only an emoji, which is a language designed for insinuation. It arrived in the slow, sympathetic smile from a woman I barely knew but who aligned herself with safety. It did not matter that we were careful. The story loved itself more than it loved the truth. The engagement announcement happened on a Monday, a day that already had its own heaviness. We were called into the atrium, the space where management liked to share news. Promotions, acquisitions, new policies about snacks. There was a bar with soft drinks pretending to be celebratory. There was a microphone that had the manners of an old friend. He stepped up in a suit I had seen only once before, a dark blue that made the white shirt beside it look surgical. He looked over us the way leaders are trained to do. Inclusively, fondly, with just enough humility to disarm. He spoke about gratitude, about the year behind us, about the shape of the next quarter. Language that held no surprises, delivered with the practiced conviction of a man who meant it. Then he said he had a piece of personal news, and the room vibrated with the sharp attention of a school of fish. He said he was engaged. He said her name. I did not know the name. The name did not know me. 4 seconds passed between the end of his sentence and the beginning of the applause. In those 4 seconds, he looked straight at me. Not long enough to trap us both. Just long enough to tell me that there was a backstory the front of the room couldn't hear. I clapped when everyone else clapped. I smiled the way someone smiles when the train has already left the station and you are still on the platform, still believing you could run and catch it only because your body hasn't yet told your mind that the gates are closed. After people clustered around him, I slipped away the way a small bird re-enters the sky, without the sky ever noticing. In the women's room, I pressed my palms against the cool porcelain edge of the sink and watched my face do its best imitation of composure. I told myself 1,000 reasons why this made sense. Perhaps she was part of the life he was returning to, the person you circle back to when the climb is over. Perhaps he had told me about an old engagement to make it clear that some circles close themselves. Perhaps I had only misread how the air warmed around us. Perhaps I had not misread anything at all, and that was the problem. He found me that evening in the smallest conference room, the one with the dimmers everyone forgot existed. The skyline was a bracelet of light. The city washed itself in a late rain. He asked if we could talk. He did not close the door. He rarely closed doors. He said the name again, and this time it felt like a stone set in a ring, inevitable, weighty. He said that it had happened quickly. Two people with history and a sudden clarity. He said he had been meaning to tell me before the announcement. He did not say why he had not. He did not need to. The company had its own weather systems. News breaks where the roof is strongest. I told him I was happy for him. I told him that she was lucky. I said it in the plain voice of a woman who knows how to staple her own heart into a manila folder. He stepped closer, not enough to be improper, enough to shorten the distance between a truth and a lie. He said that what existed between us was still something he could not categorize, could not file away. He said that the way he looked at me during the announcement was not a scalding regret, but something else. An acknowledgement of the map we had drawn together and the decision he was making to fold it up, not because the roads were false, but because he had promised himself a different destination. I breathed. He breathed. Our breaths met somewhere neutral. He said he did not expect forgiveness or even approval. He asked for understanding. The words sounded half like mercy and half like surrender. The crisis arrived in the days after, in the form of the leak spiraling into scandal. An external watchdog picked up the story, and the narrative sharpened. Procurement improprieties, leadership lapses, a murky insinuation that the leak had been tolerated for political reasons. He was pulled into interviews, into rooms where the blinds stayed closed. I was asked to reconstruct decisions, to produce logs, to name who had raised which flags and when. HR invited me to a conversation that was both formal and apologetic. Someone had suggested, with a soft cough, that my proximity to the new executive was compromising the audit. I told them the timeline. I produced the documents. My friend in HR watched me with the same expression she uses when a patient names their symptoms calmly while bleeding through their shirt. She said the investigation had to proceed. She said she was sorry for the inconvenience. I told her it wasn't an inconvenience. It was a window kept open in winter. You work more quickly. You breathe more sharply. You get through. He did not come to my desk. He did not call me into any room without a window. He sent short, precise emails at hours that were neither early nor late. He adopted a formality that felt like armor. In meetings, he spoke evenly, like a man who has decided to split himself down the middle and present only the half that can't be damaged. When he laughed, which was rarely, he made sure it was in response to something innocuous. I matched him gesture for gesture, as if we were performing an elaborate etiquette we had invented and now respected too much to abandon. The investigation did what investigations do. It produced a truth that was both smaller and larger than the rumors. The leak was traced fully to the regional manager who had been nursing a grudge after a denied promotion. There was no cabal, no conspiracy. There were only bruised human feelings trying on larger clothing. The watchdog published an update. Legal exhaled. HR did not apologize, not because they did not regret, but because regret has its own policy language, and it must be submitted in triplicate. In the quiet that followed, we both had to decide what remained. He asked me to meet him after hours in the smallest conference room again, the one with the dimmers. He stood near the glass, the city lights making a soft frame around his silhouette. He said he had called off the engagement. He said it simply. he did not layer it with confession or theater. He said it like a report from a battlefield after the soldiers have already gone home. He told me that when he had announced it, he had felt something inside him insist on my presence, like a compass nagging toward north. He had tried to ignore it because it made no sense in the life he was assembling, the safe life, the smart one. He said the smart life had never forgiven him for the day he did not choose it a decade ago. It was waiting to be chosen now like a test retaken. He had forced it. It had failed anyway. He said he did not know what to do with this information, except to bring it to me like a delisted stock, risky, unfashionable, not for public markets. I stood in arms not quite length away. I felt the heat move between us like a fuse lit, but not yet reaching its powder. He said my name the way he had the first morning. He did not touch me. He said that what he wanted with me was not a scandal or a whispered hallway rumor, not an elevator confession or a hotel room moment preserved in amber, but the plain daily ritual of coffee and weather, and knowing where the other person would be at 5:30 without checking a calendar. He asked nothing. He offered only the truth of his breath and his stillness, and the fact that he had left a promised future, because the present had finally laid its hand against his mouth and told him to be quiet and listen. I considered the map. I considered my careful habits, the small universe I had rebuilt with soft lighting and early mornings. I thought about how desire can humiliate you if you ask it to define itself too soon. I thought of my body not as a plot, but as an instrument that could tell the difference between a practiced performance and a human voice singing something that had not been rehearsed. I told him I was afraid. Not of the office or its gossip, those were weather patterns. They changed, they moved on. I was afraid of giving my steadiness to someone who had, only a week before, proclaimed a different certainty into a microphone. I was afraid of the way my heart, tidy for years, had started spilling itself into the margins. I said I would not build anything on a foundation of rescue. I would not be a consolation prize after a better story broke. He nodded. He said he would wait. He did not say for how long because deadlines are a form of pressure he refused to apply to what he wanted to be a form of mercy. He said he would behave as if we were colleagues only, the way we had been before the quiet began to shape itself into a language. He said he would not look at me during announcements. In the days that followed, he kept to that vow. He attended the meetings, he signed the documents, he sent the emails that say everything and nothing. If we shared an elevator, he looked at the numbers. If we passed in the hallway, he asked about a report in a tone exactly calibrated to reveal nothing else. And yet, small things betrayed us. The way his voice softened, nearly imperceptibly, when he said my name. The way my hand found the espresso machine earlier than usual, as if being awake could shield me from myself. Weeks passed. The project stabilized. The city remembered that it had a summer. The ficus in our corner produced an improbable new leaf. In the after-work light of a Tuesday, the office felt like a set after the cameras have been moved away. He came by my desk. He did not lean on anything. He asked if I might walk with him to the lobby because he was going that way and perhaps we were headed in the same direction. We were. We walked in the neutral silence of two people moving through a shared building. In the elevator, a young analyst joked that we looked like the king and queen of something. We laughed politely. When the doors opened, the lobby was cool and bright, the marble floor polished into sentimental reflections. He stood near the revolving doors and asked if I had found the fear diminishing or if it had learned new tricks. I told him the truth. It had changed shape. It had stopped pretending it was about the office. It had started telling me a different story. that I had spent a year building a life that fit into my own arms, and I was afraid to stretch them. He listened. He did not urge, did not coax. He said only that he understood, that he could admire bravery while also forgiving its delays. We walked outside. The evening air tasted like rain trying to make up its mind. He said good night. He began to turn away. I felt a strand inside me, something old and private, loosen the knot it had tied for my protection. I reached for his sleeve, the same smallest truth as before. It was a gentle touch, the kind you could deny in a photograph. He paused. He stepped closer in the fraction that separates courtesy from declaration. We did not kiss. It would have been theatrics. Instead, we stood with the city between us and around us and in us. And I said that I didn't need a story worth announcing. I needed a life. I said that mine had room if he had the patience to occupy it slowly, without fanfare, without hoping for headlines. He said he did. He said my name the way a promise sounds when it is content to be ordinary and therefore real. The weeks that followed were not a montage. They were not swirls of sheets or clinking glasses. They were calendars and meetings and the small daily choreography of two people learning each other's weather patterns. We met for coffee before the elevators grew impatient. We talked about work because it was honest. We talked about the past because it shaped our hands. We didn't talk about the engagement he had called off, except to acknowledge that other people's griefs deserve respect, even when they are not ours to mend. When we finally chose intimacy, it arrived not with fireworks, but with the quiet confidence of a door closing softly behind us. The night thinned around us, leaving breath and promise. The room was not a secret. It was just ours. In the office, nothing dramatic happened. The rumor died of boredom. The leak receded into the logbooks. The ficus kept its courageous leaf. He led with a restraint that earned him more loyalty than any rousing speech might have. I did my work with the steadiness that had always been mine. We did not try to prove anything to anyone except ourselves. Months later, at the end of a long evening during which the city out the window wore its lights like a shawl against early autumn, the office quieted. One by one, floors darkened, each switch a small surrender. We stood at the glass, two shadows overlapping in a minor key. He asked if I regretted the slow way we had chosen, the lack of spectacle. I said that I would have regretted anything else. Down below, a woman crossed the street holding her coat closed at the throat. I recognized the gesture. You keep warm by keeping close what you can. I felt his hand, steady, respectful, rest at the small of my back. It was not possession. It was orientation, the light pressure a person gives another when guiding them out of a crowded room. We did not move. We only stood, and the quiet settled around us like a trust fall. The office lights dimmed one by one. His shadow lingered near mine. The city exhaled. Somewhere, faintly, a bar of jazz untangled itself from a nearby building, drifted up, and found us. I thought of all the rooms where announcements are made, and all the rooms where lives are. I thought of the distance between them, and how, if you are patient, it can be crossed by a single breath. Let's go, I said, not because we were late for anything, but because going together was the point. We walked toward the elevator, and the doors slid open with their familiar, forgiving hum. We entered, and the doors closed, and the city carried on without noticing that two people had chosen something quiet, and therefore durable. And that was all the story I ever wanted to tell.